Hello there. Miss Higgy coming at you again this week. And thank you so much for coming back again this week. Um, Tonight, no exception, we're going to talk about race again. The more you get to know me, the more you'll get to know that I talk about race a lot. It's just the elephant in the room that I see, and I want everybody else to see it and talk about it too. Tonight, though, I want us to explore a particular question about race, um, and that is, why is America so afraid of the truth of her history? And what kinds of things are happening this week or in the last week or so that make that such a prevalent question for me? A few weeks ago, I said that racism is as American as apple pie, baseball, and the Star Spangled Banner, and that's my truth, and I'm sticking by it. And so, what's so prevalent this week, right? So, I think we all know what happened yesterday on Capitol Hill when the Republicans refused to seat a commission to explore what happened at the Capitol building on January 6th. They were calling it the 1-6 Commission, and the Republicans voted against it. Um, and that's very interesting. So, like, why would they vote against it? What is the truth that they don't want to deal with that pertains to January 6th? On January 6th, people tried to, they're calling it an insurrection, but let's be clear, it was an attempted coup of the government. It was dissatisfaction with election results. It was prompted by, quote unquote, a sitting president. Ugh, can't believe I just said that. But that's who he was at the time. And you don't want to investigate it. The very people who don't want to investigate it, their lives were at risk. Cops were wounded and murdered, killed, and the property was destroyed. It was just chaotic. It was like the most uncivilized thing that we've seen in a very long time. And these were white Americans who were doing that. And who were these white Americans? A friend of mine pointed out, which I hadn't really thought about, that I hadn't put it in these terms anyway, that those white guys, those white folks who stampeded the Capitol building, they are the same people, the descendants of the same people who, on any given Sunday would hang a black person from a tree and sit beneath that tree with that body hanging from that tree and have a picnic. Like, who does that? What kind of people? What's the mindset of the people who can do that? Those were their descendants that were up on the hill that day. Those same people would, when they were finished their lunch, I guess they'd take the body down and they would dismember the person, and people would go home with parts of the person's body as souvenirs. A finger, a toe, a penis. Who knows? Who does that? Those are the people up on Capitol Hill. That's who does that. Their offspring. And these same people too, and I'm just telling you all this because it's a part of America's history that she doesn't want to tell, and that I didn't even know until I was in my 30s, right? Those same people took pictures, Google it, of people hanging from trees and made postcards of them and sent those pictures around the world as though it was something to be proud of, right? And worse, all of it's horrible, but they also took the skin from the people hanging from those trees, particularly Nat Turner. I remember reading that about his skin, and they made purses for women out of human skin. That's the kind of hate that America has not dealt with, and because she hasn't dealt with it, it's still festering, and it showed its ugly face on January 6th. And yes, we can say that it's politics, and the Republicans don't want to jeopardize upcoming elections, but that's only part of the story. The other part of the story is it's her history, and she's just not ready, willing, wanting to deal with it. What else is happening that says America's not ready to deal with her truth? Well, also this past week, we had the University of North Carolina deny tenure to Nicole Hannah-Jones. Well, who is Nicole Hannah-Jones? hopefully you're familiar with the 1619 Project, which was an extensive report that was done for the New York Times. Kudos to the New York Times for doing allowing Nicole Hannah-Jones and other reporters to share this information with us. But she spearheaded it, and basically it was a chronicle of 400 years of Black folks being in the United States. So she wrote history from 1619 to 2019, what it was like, the things that we've done since we've gotten here, the atrocities that have happened to us, the contributions that we've made. She just told another history that was different than the history that we've been taught or not taught, right? And the school offered her this position that apparently it normally just comes with tenure. And the faculty didn't have a problem with her getting tenure, and kudos to them that they still support that she gets tenure. But it was some old racist geezers on the board of trustees who are supporting a conservative, and conservative is just buzzword for racist narrative, that they don't want her. I think they want to offer like a 5-year contract, but not tenure. And that's unprecedented that this has happened. And the crazy thing is that, the reason she's being shut down is because white historians who have painted a very different story about America's history, and certainly as it pertains to Black folks, they don't want her truth to be told. And what's crazy about it is that normally, if there is a scholarly difference of opinion or discrepancy, you talk it out, you debate it, whether you debate it in writing or you debate it in written discourse or what have you, but it's dealt with, scholarly. But there seems that they're not willing to do that. Like, I'm sure that Nicole Hannah-Jones, who has been working on this for a long time, she'll be happy to sit down and challenge any historian or engage in debate with any historian about her findings. And that's what you normally do in these kinds of situations. But there's been no offer to do that. And we have to say, why? What truth are they afraid of? If you're so well grounded in what you've been teaching for the last, couple centuries, decades, then you can support it. And you know what? And we can all listen in, and we can decide which story, whose version of history sounds more credible. How about that? So, and I'm loving the alum and the faculty because they're supporting her on that. And I'm loving that the New York Times hasn't turned their back on her either. So that's good to know. And now they're looking at revisiting it. I think at the end of June, the Board of Trustees said that they'll look at it again, but they shouldn't even be involved in it. So keep up the good fight, and support her. If you live in North Carolina, if you're an alum of UNC, support her and making it happen that she gets tenure in any kind of way we can. What's another way that we know that America's just not ready to deal with her truth? Like, what is critical race theory? Because I guarantee that a month ago or a couple of months ago, you never heard of it. Now all of a sudden, you got little school boards, charter schools, and what have you, and legislators, they are pushing that we don't teach critical race theory. Critical race theory, in a nutshell, is simply an examination of law as it intersects with race. So why do you think America wouldn't want to deal with that truth? I'm just guessing. But now all of a sudden, you don't even know what it is. They're just knowing that they should oppose it. So that's what's happening. It's just crazy. This week, too, is very interesting because it's a year. I cannot believe it's a year. It's a year since the murder of George Floyd. And what's significant about that in terms of America's history is that after the murder of George Floyd, America committed that she was going to do a reckoning on race. We've never had a truth and reconciliation as they've had in South Africa, but America said we're going to look at race, and we're going to look at race in terms of, how it's affected Black folks. What has been the Black experience, being American. And you had people apologizing and, chief diversity officer was like the hottest job going, and companies were offering space to Black folks to express yourselves and your feelings, and be quiet and let them talk, and we're going to do cultural competency training. You had all kinds of stuff. The focus was definitely on Black folks in terms of race in America. They were hearing us, even though we have been telling them forever about the cops, killing us and falsely accusing us and falsely arresting us and filling up the prisons with us. But for some reason, it took, George Floyd being murdered on TV for them to say, oh, wow, maybe that is true. But like I said, America doesn't want to talk about race, and certainly not in terms of Black folks. So what does she do? She's tired already, and it hasn't even been a year. So lately we've been hearing about, the anti-Asian hate, that gets us off the subject. We still can say we're talking about race, but we're not talking about race in terms of how it impacts, the Black community. And not only are we talking about anti-Asian hate, somehow Black people are the face of that. Like, really? I am so sure that the massacre that happened in Atlanta and the subsequent massacre that happened at the FedEx building in Tennessee, those were both white shooters, but somehow Black people are the face of Asian hate, and they're fearful of us. Like, really? I'm not going to go off on a tangent on that, because it's just a whole nother conversation. But the reality is that America, again, doesn't want to deal with race, with Black folks, so let's change the narrative. But they can't change the narrative, because guess what else happened this week? 100 years is being acknowledged for the massacre that took place in Tulsa, where a thriving Black community that was self-sufficient and, its own banks, its own schools, its own everything. Like, we were, talk about separate but equal. The problem is we were separate, but we were not equal. We were better than a whole lot of white communities, and white folks were not having that. So, they use an excuse to do what? To massacre Black folks. And they burned down first of all, they looted the stuff that they didn't have in their homes. They stole it from the Black homes for their homes, and then they just killed and burned down the whole town. Unreal. So now America, who doesn't want to deal with her truth, will make it seem like, this is some isolated incident, but it's not an isolated incident. I think we all remember the movie Rosewood. That's true, wasn't fiction. Rosewood, Florida. And then a friend reminded me this week of Wilmington, North Carolina. The same thing happened, where a whole town was destroyed. And you know what? So they may not light a torch to a town or drop a bomb on it as they did in Tulsa. But what they do now is more sophisticated, right? What they call them, Jim Crows, Jim Crow Senior, Jim Crow Esquire. We heard all kinds of things about Jim Crow 2.0 or whatever. But now what they do is use this technique called eminent domain. And eminent domain means that the government will come into your community and decide that you need some government facility of some sort. Whether it's a hospital, a school, or hey, even a highway. Like, now the people in this community have not asked for any of this. But what they will do is identify thriving Black communities and destroy them. That's a good business there that's doing well. Okay, well, we need to put a school there. We need to put a hospital there. And, they offer you peanuts for your business, and they destroy, so it's just a modern way, if you will, of undermining Black success. America is just not ready to deal with Black success. Why? Because that's not the narrative that they've taught about us. That's not the narrative that they've told about us. We're supposed to be shiftless and lazy and certainly not educated or capable enough to run businesses or have whole towns on our own without input from white folks. And we are not supposed to live better, than white folks. And they will do whatever to not allow that to happen, and to destroy it whenever they see it. So the more things change, the more things remain the same. Tulsa, 100 years later, and here we are, dealing with that. America will not teach the truth of her history in terms of slavery in general. We've had you don't learn about slave rebellions in school. Most people who are listening to me probably have no idea who Denmark Vesey is, who Gabrielle Prosser is. You might know who Nat Turner is because of the Nate Parker movie, Birth of a Nation. If you haven't seen it, I recommend that you do. Stonewall Rebellion. Please look up all of those things that I've just mentioned, and know your history. These people were heroes. They should be down in every American book as a hero. These are people who fought against the enslavement of their own people. How is that not a hero? Why would America not want us to recognize these people as heroes? You know who knew who Denmark Vesey was? Dylan Roof. That's who knew. Denmark Vesey was planning a revolt, a slave revolt in Charleston. And the church that he used to plan it from is the church that Dylan Roof chose to go in and kill those 9 innocent Black folks who were kind to him and allowed him into their church. So he knew that history, right? We must know that history as well. We have to be ready to counter any narrative that's negative about Black people in America, and those are stories that we need to know. And like I said, please see the movie Birth of a Nation. What's interesting when I think about the question that I have about America not being ready to deal with her truth is the governor of Oklahoma, Governor Stitt, who said that he wasn't even sure that the truth of the Tulsa massacre should be taught in Oklahoma. Like, it happened in Oklahoma. Like, really? Shouldn't be taught there? And his reason is that he didn't feel that history should not be taught in a way that anyone feels guilty about it. So does that mean that you don't feel guilty about the Confederacy? You don't feel guilty about the KKK? Because certainly, that's a part of history. You don't feel guilty about just slavery in general, because you teach that, and even when you try and sugarcoat it, it's still something that you should feel guilty about. And when he says guilty, he really means uncomfortable. Let's not talk about things that make white folks specifically uncomfortable. And it takes me to Miss Viola Fletcher, who testified before Congress. She is the oldest living person to have survived the Tulsa massacre. She is 107 years old. She was 7 years old when this happened. And she said in her testimony that she lives it like every day. She remembers it just like it happened yesterday. So if she can be uncomfortable for 100 years, please explain to me why some student can't be uncomfortable learning about this history for a semester, right? For, as a part of your academic curriculum. It just doesn't make sense. And again, when we talk about uncomfortable, whose comfort are we concerned about? Why is it okay that I feel uncomfortable, but not the person, not white folks? And let's put it where it is, right? Why, when we talk about people not feeling uncomfortable, we're really saying don't make white folks feel uncomfortable. But if you're uncomfortable, well, just kind of get used to it. You'll get over it. So no, and again, if it's an uncomfortable conversation, in my world, it's a conversation that we probably should be having. And I say that all the time, and I stick to it. In America, there is an unfinished conversation, and that conversation is between Black Americans and white Americans. And until we have that conversation, we're going to keep ending up back in this situation that we're in right now, where America is adamant that she's going to deny her truth, and she can be as adamant as she wishes. But at the end of the day, um, all truth, the truth shall set you free. All of us. It'll set white folks free, because when white folks say to black people, get over it, I don't think you even understand what you're telling us to get over. Like, I don't think if you knew your history, you wouldn't say that. I've often said if America knew its history, it would wonder why black people are not afraid of white folks. So don't tell us to get over it. Don't try to deny your history. Like, step into it, own it. Let's talk about it. Black folks, know your history as well. Know that you come from a good stock of people, that we are resilient. I mean, we say it, but can we really believe it and live it and be proud, right? Like, because when we're proud and we know our history, we are not killing each other. We are holding each other up high. We are walking around like peacocks, smiling and looking pretty and all the time, right? And that's who we have to be. We have to celebrate who we are. But, back to my question, white folks, you're afraid of your truth. It is your truth. You love telling other people what you think our truth is. And I always say, like, diagnosing pathologies in other people, and it's time to examine yourself. I found out that last week alone, there were 12 mass shootings. That's uncivilized. And we should want to know why, right? What's happening with that? So again, America, look at yourself and own your truth. Tell your truth. And I just want to say that was what's been on my mind for the last week, amongst other things. But those were the big biggies that jumped out at me, and I wanted to jump on and share them with you. Hopefully, you found this enlightening, that you learned something that you didn't learn, that you didn't know before, that you will look up some of the stuff that I mentioned here today and enlighten yourself about, our history. And that you'll come back next week when I come again. What do we say? Like, click, subscribe, and please leave a comment if you can. And please, I hope to see you back here next week. And in the meantime, this is Miss Higgy saying take care of yourself, take care of your peeps, and I'll see you back here in another week. Miss Higgy signing off. Good night.